All right, so Derek Brown is an author, NASM-certified wellness coach, and founder of Positive Damage Inc. Previously, Brown owned Spirited Awards 2017 Best American Cocktail Bar, Columbia Room in Washington, D.C., and was one of the nation's top bartenders. Brown published his book, Spirits, Sugar, Water, Bitters: How the Cocktail Conquered the World in 2019, and was named 2020 Author of the Year at the Nightclub Bar Show Awards. He published his second book, Mindful Mixology, a comprehensive guide to no and low alcohol cocktails, in 2022. Brown has been recognized as a leading beverage figure affecting positive change in the global bar industry by Drinks International in 2020 in their Bar World 100 list as one of the most inspirational people and places that will shape how we drink in 2023. In Imbibe magazine's Imbibe 75 for 2023, and is awarded the Industry Impact Award at the Bar and Restaurant Expo in 2024. He is also the host of the Mindful Drinking podcast. Derek, take it away.
Thank you so much, Billy. I really appreciate that introduction. So yeah, I do a lot of different things now. And as Billy shared, I am the owner of Positive Damage Inc. And so we do a lot of things around consulting, classes, and content around mindful drinking. And also no and low alcohol cocktails and social wellness. But I want to take a second to make a distinction between mindful drinking and what I'm going to share tonight. Because I think that mindful drinking is encompassing the way that people drink, and usually as a preventative measure in the way that people drink, right? So, there are people, and maybe even some of you, who drink because of peer pressure or because of conformity or just out of habit. It's just a normal thing to do for you. And they want to change their relationship with alcohol. And that's where mindful drinking comes in. Recovery is something totally different. They are both on a spectrum, but then again, so is light and dark, right? So I think it's important to recognize that when I'm talking about mindful drinking, when I have that hat on out in the world, it tends to be more about prevention and the way that people drink alcohol and making adjustments to it. Whereas recovery, and in the story that I'm going to share, has a lot more to do with, when we need help, when we need medical help or therapeutic help, or peer recovery groups. And so I want to make that distinction because I think that's a really important one. And I'm also a person with lived experience in bipolar depression and alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that tonight. I think it's really, I've tried to be as open as possible, and share my whole story. But of course, it's a very long one now. You heard earlier that I'm now 50 years old. So there's a lot more story to tell. And there's lots of different entry points to it. And so I thought that I would start the entry point with talking about something joyful, actually. When I was 13 years old, I came across straight edge punk music. So for those of you who don't know what that is, essentially, if you're to take a chainsaw, fire it up, and then have people scream positive affirmations over it, that's a lot of what it sounds like. There are bands like Youth of Today, and Bad Brains, and Minor Threat, and they were all my favorite bands. And I discovered them when I was 13, and it was very lucky that I did, because it was this incredible community of people who were looking for a positive change. They didn't drink, they didn't smoke, they didn't do drugs. That wasn't their outlet. But they all shared a lot in common, and something that up until that point I unfortunately shared as well, is I had a lot of what they call adverse childhood experiences. I'd gone through a lot of things in my youth that were really challenging, from my father, who had substance use disorder as well, to losing a sister in a drunk driving accident, and to various aspects of youth that we don't have to go into every detail of, but were really challenging and put me in a place where I was really confused and didn't really understand what to do with all of this pain and all of this hurt. I had no idea. I was 13, 14 years old. So as I went along, that was an incredibly positive thing for me to discover that. But it was, just one aspect. It didn't help me dig deep into the things that I had experienced and really look at them and try to deal with them in a healthy way. So when I moved, my parents moved to Charleston, South Carolina, I lost that community and I changed the way that I kind of experienced things. I was no longer, had that support group. And so I started drinking and doing drugs. I fell into a group that did that. And my parents, my stepdad at that point, my mom got divorced when I was 16, which led me to go out on my own. I essentially liberated myself because I didn't want to be there for the fallout around that. I experienced a lot of negative stuff and I didn't want any more. So I went out on my own, and that's hard. I don't know if any of you all remember being 16. It sounds like some of you all might have children that are have older than 16, but you don't know anything when you're 16. You don't know a lot. And so I went on my own, and it was a really, I didn't have any skills. I didn't know what I was going to do. I dropped out of school. And I had all this hurt and pain that I had no idea what to do with. So I was a loaded cannon. So who is going to accept a kid like that? The hospitality industry with welcome arms. And that was actually really, really good in some ways. I was 16, I started working in a restaurant that was a Jewish deli, actually, in Olney, Maryland, called BJ Pumpernickel's. And I started working for Barry Schwartz, who was a larger-than-life character. And I loved it. There was these old grizzled line cooks, some of whom had been to prison. There were lifetime waitresses. It's exactly like, I'm sure, a lot of your all stories out there. You meet some really incredible people with some life stories that are unbelievable. But I also met a lot of people who were hurt and in pain and didn't know how to deal with it, just like I didn't know how to deal with it. So we bonded over that in often unhealthy ways. And part of that was alcohol and substances and drugs. And so the challenge around that is that became super normal for me. I just thought that was how life goes, right? I was happy to be in it. And in many ways, even though, alcohol and drugs are not the best tool that we have to deal with some of that hurt and pain, it was a useful tool for me at the time. I needed it. And I needed that community, as broken as they were. And so even though I'm glad that I have moved on and have better tools, and some of those friendships have lasted, but ultimately I was grateful for that community. And so as I kind of went along, I tried a bunch of different jobs, but I always came back to bars and restaurants. And I started working as a bartender when I was about 27 years old, about a decade later. And that's when it really fit like a glove. And actually, I'm going to give you a quick aside, because one of the funny things is, I go back to BJ Pumpernickel's. I was working as what I tell people, when I'm telling a short story, is a garde manger, right? Which of course is a cold prep, salad prep. But really what I was is I just made the salads, this one particular salad, which was egg salad, tuna, whitefish salad, and tuna salad, all on a bed of romaine with different olives on the top of them. And so with an ice cream scoop, I was just basically scooping it. So no skilled labor there. And so I actually started in back of the house, but Barry Schwartz came back, and he hated when people were talking too much in the kitchen and I was talking too much in the kitchen. And so he was a huge guy, and he put his hand on my shoulder and just dragged me all the way to the deli counter and just pushed me forward and said, "Here, let's put that mouth to work." And so that was the definitive change from back of the house to front of the house. And I started, serving kasha varnishkas and cutting tongue and trying to talk with, the older Jewish population there as a young Catholic boy with not some in common, but not a lot in common. And so it was a very unique and interesting position that I was in, but I learned a lot, and that was great. But so here I was at 27, I became a bartender, now front of the house, and really, I loved it. It fit like a glove. All the things that I wanted were there. The social aspect of it, the money was there. I started to realize that people really needed me because they couldn't get to the alcohol without me. And also, the alcohol was unlimited for me, right? The places I started working at, shift drinks were normal. Drinking from you know, when your shift ends to 4 o'clock at night in Washington, D.C., all the way to 8 a.m., totally normal, totally reasonable. I engaged in this sort of vampiric lifestyle. And I did that for a long time. And I was young. And so in some ways I could absorb it, right? Like when you're younger, your body just is healthier and better. And even though you're not getting the sleep you need, even though you're not getting the nutrition you need, and you're definitely not getting the support you need, you can weather it a little bit. And so I did that for a while, and I did really well. Like I said, I love bartending, and I thought to myself, somebody in the world is the best bartender in the world, and I don't know why that shouldn't be me. And by the way, just to be clear, I think you all know this, but I'm not the best bartender in the world, right? And I don't think anybody would know who that person is anyway. So it really doesn't matter, but I did pretty well, and I learned a lot, and I'm really proud of that. And I got really, you know, just fascinated by bartending and learned everything I can. And as I went along, I moved up the ranks. I, you know, studied to become a sommelier. I became a bar manager. I became a general manager. And I got to open my own places. In 2010, I opened my first bar. 2011, that was the Passenger with my brother, Tom. And then the 2011, shortly after, I opened the Columbia Room, which would later be an award-winning and much beloved bar in Washington, D.C. And I, you know, I should have been doing great, honestly. In 2015, I won the Best American, I'm sorry, in 2015, I won, you know, Bartender of the Year. 2017, I won the Best American Cocktail Bar. I was named the Chief Spirits Advisor to the National Archives. I think that I you know, I had at that point 3 James Beard nominations. And I was feeling like, you know, in a professional sense, like I was going the places I wanted to go. However, in a personal sense, I was wrecked. All this alcohol, all these drugs, all the relationships, all the things that I didn't address, all of those things that happened in my youth that I didn't know how to address, they never went anywhere. They were with me the whole time. And the anxiousness and the depression and all of the reckless behavior that goes along with my particular mental health issues, they caught up to me. And though I had these professional accolades, personally, I was not doing well. All the areas of my life were suffering. My relationships, I was getting divorced. My health, I had high blood pressure and high cholesterol. I was, or the bad kind, and I was, you know, financially, I was not doing great. There was just so many markers of my life that were just not there. Even though if you looked on from the outside, it would have looked like I ruled the world at that point. I did not. And I got into a relationship outside of my marriage that led to the birth of my son, which was a really wonderful moment, but a moment that I had to confront a lot of things that I had not confronted. And so there are lots of little things that happened along the way, but I'll share one story that was particularly painful and I think was a really turning point for me. As there was one morning after I had split from his mother, and I was just in so much pain, and I woke up, and the depression, the depression part of bipolar was in full effect. And I was inconsolable. I was crying. I couldn't stop crying. And my son, who was a toddler at the time, tried to console me. And that was just so hard. Just as your son is trying to console you, has no capacity to even comprehend what was happening. And here he was saying, "It's okay, Daddy. It's going to be all right." And it was too much for me to bear. I did what any 40-year-old man would do when they need help. I called my mom. I literally called my mom. And I said, "I can't do this. I need you to come pick up Avery." And had she done that and not intervened and stepped in, something else might have happened. But as it was, she's a nurse. She understood, she saw what was happening, and she knew me better than anyone. So she said, "Let's get you to the emergency room." And so I went. And it was a hard time for me. I felt incredibly embarrassed, you know, like I felt like people could see right through me, and that they could see all the pain that I had, and how, for me at the time, how worthless I felt as a father, as somebody, who was supposed to be successful but wasn't. I was afraid people saw me in the hospital rooms. I was on a gurney outside. It was embarrassing and it was scary. But it was necessary. At that point, I had to admit I couldn't help myself. I had done everything that I could do to help myself, but I was not going to do this alone. And my mom saw that. And I guess I knew that because I made the call, which I'm so grateful for, that I had at least the foresight to do that. And so from there, I went to an outpatient program where I entered as a dual diagnosis with mental health issues and substance use issues. And I thought it was going to be incredibly stupid, honestly, even though I knew I needed help. I saw the things I had to do, like movement therapy, and I just was like, what the hell is this? I did not expect this was going to help me in any way. Honestly, movement therapy was probably the best thing that I did, though. It was amazing that all of a sudden there was this community of people around me who were going through the same things that I was going through. And they were so open and vulnerable, and they're so willing to tell their story and share what they were going through. And they didn't have any judgment on what I was going through. And that touched me so much. I remember there was this one moment where we just had this, I guess you would say, silly exercise, but it was really, really important to me. Is the person to your left or whatever was writing just one nice thing about you and then passing it on and then passing it on in a circle. And this person didn't know me at all. They didn't know anything about me. So they just write, I really liked the way you dressed today. You looked really nice. And I broke down and just lost it. This person, this was an important aspect of me, but I guess I didn't know people could see me in that way, and it was amazing. And that just happened throughout the program, that I really got all of the things I need to get started. And I know that a lot of you all have probably been part of restaurant or bar openings before, and what a struggle it is just to get to the starting line. And that's how I felt. I was getting to the starting line because knowing that I had these issues, knowing that I had to confront them, didn't mean that I was any better. And so that's when my journey really began of healing. And so I had to accept that I was in a position where I needed help, and I needed to get that help. And I did. And a lot of that help it wasn't one thing, and I think, I hope you all know this, it's not that one thing can help you, right? Like you go to therapy and that's it, you're done. Good, you talked it out. You had a therapeutic session, it's good. You got drugs. The drugs are going to help you, right? They're legal this time, they're prescribed. Great, SSRIs, whatever the hell they are, or let's say that you just started meditating or yoga or whatever. These things are great. They're awesome. But you got to go for not everything, but you have to really use a number of modalities, a number of different things to help you. Because think about all the things and experiences that got you into it. And that's what I had to recognize. It took me at that point 40 years to get to that point where I was broken down on my couch, crying and could not stop. And so it was not going to be an immediate fix. It was not going to be one thing that helped me. I had to start changing my lifestyle in many different ways. And so I did. I took that, and it was really, really, really hard. It was painful to look at myself in that way. It was hard to dig deep. And, I started taking therapeutic medication. I started going to therapy. I started really sharing the things that I needed to share and understanding how other people felt through the process, because it wasn't just me that was hurting. I was hurting other people too. And I needed to change my diet, and I needed to not stop bragging about sleeping 4 hours a night, because that's not a thing to brag about. That was not half, but it was a big part of the problem, is I was just constantly in the deprived state of sleep. My brain wasn't healing. A lot of people think when you recover at night, it's about recovering your body, and that is part of it. But actually, it's your brain and the emotional work that your brain does to help you, support you every night. And so I had to learn about that. That's when I went and I started focusing on, I became a certified wellness coach. I actually don't coach anybody in wellness. I only did that because I wanted to learn about all of these aspects of health, because I knew that that would support me too. That if I moved, if I recovered, if I ate better, if I slept, all of these, if I had a positive mindset, all of these things would change. I ended up, and I'm still at the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, studying positive psychology, because a lot of it is just the things that I learned when I was a kid that weren't right, they weren't true. They weren't true about me. And I went to a study with SMART, which is a self-management and recovery training, which was really great. And through that, I just want to share two things that really, really helped me to contextualize everything and to really heal. Because all of that stuff, everything I just mentioned, got to this point where I still had to confront myself and what I thought of myself. And there was two things that really helped me. One was called USA, which actually has nothing to do with the country. And the other one's called ULA. And USA is unconditional self-acceptance. This is my story. This is what I went through. It's not awesome. It was really, really tough. And it still has its ups and downs, but it's me. You know, it's the life that I lived, and I'm proud of it. I'm grateful for it, every part of it. And as far as the ULA, that's universal life acceptance, right? The fact is that the world is never going to be okay. It's not going to be okay enough to heal us, right? I don't want to say that there's always going to be war and poverty and stuff. I hope we can fix those things. But for right now, those things are real and they're happening and they're hurting people. And there's things that are out there in this world that we can't change right now. We can't fix. So the world is never going to be okay to heal us. So we have to accept where we're starting from, where we're at, and understand that people around us are going through a lot of the same challenges that we are going through, or we went through, and they're making decisions sometimes from a place of hurt and pain. And so, ironically, I end this journey at that 13-year-old boy, right? I said 16-year-old kids don't know anything, but for some reason that 13-year-old boy knew something when I started going to those straight edge shows. I know that community mattered. I know that being positive about my life mattered. And I know that living a life that was geared towards values and bettering myself was there, and that unconditional self-acceptance and unconditional love is a critical part of it. So that's my story. I mean, that's all I had to share tonight. I don't know what else. If you'd like to add anything else, we have 45 seconds or something. So I'm happy to add anything else. But I'm so grateful that you all were willing to listen to that story. I appreciate it, because it helps me, I assure you, more than hopefully it helps you too, but it helps me more than anything.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so we have about 15 minutes left for our meeting. I'd like to now turn the floor over to anyone who would like to ask questions.
Yeah, thanks for just sharing like an unscripted version of you, for one. Like that's a lot that you just dropped on us, and I appreciate that. And